Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of Get Psyched. I am here today with one of the Indigo Project's most amazing psychologists. We've got Sarah Marshall on board, and today she's going to be here to help us explore compassion and how compassion is important in relation to ourselves, in relation to our relationships, and really sort of through everything that we have to truck through in life. Hey, how are you going, Sarah? Thanks for joining.
I was a bit stressed trying to get on here, and now I'm on. I think, like, hopefully the hardest part is over.
It can be confusing. Instagram is a little bit of a puzzle land for people who aren't on it all the time, like me. And then when you are on it all the time, like me, that just breeds a whole lot of other problems. So let's get stuck in. We're going to kick off with our 3 F-word questions. So tell us, how are you feeling today?
Well, I guess a little bit nervous, I guess, about this talk, but really excited, I guess, to share some of my thoughts and ideas with the broader community. So that's sort of, I guess, the starting place. If I'm to step back a bit further, and to be really honest, I suppose since COVID, as you know, kind of changed the world and changed what's happening inside homes, I've really had an incredible emotional roller coaster. And that's not completely unusual. Okay, so, I'm happy to say that I experienced the whole realm of human emotion here. But I would say, like, the intensity and the frequency with which those emotions kind of have been showing up has just really surprised me. I do this work, but I've been surprised with what's shown up inside myself, I suppose. And just to provide a bit of context to that, so my house has looked like a couple of people working at home, jiggling in and out of the same kind of home office, and a couple of kids thrown into the mix. So I think that's the context within which that's been happening. So yeah, it's been really interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure that a lot of people are feeling you in that regard too. And so tell us something that you're failing at the moment.
I kind of love that you asked this. And look, if I gave my inner critic full reign on this question, my response would be different to the one I'm going to give. But I think that, as a therapist and as someone that works to not only hear that voice, I'm going to just give it a slightly different spin, if that's okay, Ash.
Yeah, love it.
So it's really more for me what is challenging me through this period. And if I'm to be, I guess, really honest about that, it's about kind of slowing down enough, giving myself permission to slow down enough to notice what's happening emotionally. So to kind of, I guess, be in the moment and to acknowledge what's showing up, and then to share that in a way that seems kind of fair to people of different ages, namely a partner and to kids of different ages. So to sort of see what are my needs in those moments, I guess, and to share that. That's been a real challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all on the journey dealing with that in sort of our own different ways.
Yeah.
Which brings me to our last question. What are you finding out about yourself?
How relevant some of the compassion work in particular that I do with, I guess, clients, the space that I hold for others, how relevant that is to myself. Now, is that surprising? Probably not. So I've been on that journey already. So, for example, when I came back to therapy, I had my mum hat on for a long time, and I'd had an academia hat on for a long time. And I was really mean to myself, when I came back to that space around how was I doing? I should have been performing better, I guess some of this imposter sort of stuff. And I guess I really sort of tapped into the compassion work there, and I've needed to tap into it again more recently in parenting. And I'm just trying to kind of wear that hat a little bit and figure out what that looks like on the go, right? So I
Yeah.
think in a way what happened was, if I'm to be fair, I was like, I could hear this thing saying, oh, like about what was happening on my insides. And then I guess I thought I didn't have the time, right? So wearing all those different hats and shifting them so quickly, I kind of just dismissed it like, I don't have time to listen to me, to my needs. So I'm just going to ignore that. And that really didn't work very well. It just, Yeah, it was showing up in my body in places that I didn't expect it. And then it got to the point where I had to slow down and do something. And slow down does not, by the way, look like go and have an hour to myself. It didn't look like that. And I think that was part of the challenge, is
Mm,
how would that look during this time? And it looked different.
mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's get into this juicy topic of the day, which is compassion. Now, it's a big flowery word, and often, we know on a more conceptual level, oh, it's good to be nice to ourselves, and we have to learn how to be compassionate towards ourselves. But obviously, in all the work that you've done, you've just been learning more and more about how it is so important and how we can apply it to ourselves. So, what made you recognize how important compassion really is?
Well, I could feel, so I guess what really kind of pulled me up was I could feel this sort of frustration, almost kind of anger, kind of bubbling, kind of on the surface. And I started to notice that little things were happening where normally they look little, right? But in the course of, and life before COVID, maybe they wouldn't have caused me so much kind of stress. But what happened was I could see that the way I was responding just seemed really out of proportion, I guess, to what was happening. So maybe something little, and then all of a sudden, there was this overwhelming kind of urge to yell, and then, and some of that, did show up in my behavior. I've got to be honest, as it does in all our lives. And I was like, wow, I'm not proud of this. What's going on?
Mm.
So I took myself into my therapy cave, gave myself permission to kind of go back there and just sort of, I noticed I was just completely ignoring it. I was like, I guess my energy, if you like, it was all flowing out, and there was nothing. I was not leaving any reserves at all. There was nothing left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've got to turn the lens back on yourself at times, hey? So I'd love to hear a little bit more about, we were chatting earlier today about the research that you did and how you discovered that self-compassion showed up in that. I'd love to explore that a
Yeah.
little bit more with you. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah. I'm just gonna have a moment here. I think I'm gonna need to plug. I might potentially need to stop in a second and try and plug my phone in. It just said 20% power. What's your insight on that? Is that gonna last?
I reckon 20% is going to get you there. We've got
Okay.
another 10
You go.
minutes. We could go.
Sorry, sorry, sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah. Um, you're gonna have to take me back. Sorry, sorry, Ash.
Yeah, so the research that you did on adolescence and how
Yes.
self-compassion showed up for that, I found that so interesting, and I think we'd love to hear some more about it.
Yeah, great. Okay, so that was a different life, but yeah, a paper I published back in, I think it was 2015, it actually came out. So we followed, me and my team I was working with, we followed some adolescents through high school. And we had kind of ratings, like 2,500, so a large number. And we had kind of ratings of their compassion, and we had ratings of their self-esteem, their well-being, and their general mental health. And I guess what we found was that for kids, so we know self-esteem, it's an important thing, right? So this sense of self-worth, if you like, and if kids don't have it, over time, there's a good chance that's going to contribute to depression, even suicidality, those kind of things. But with these kids, what we did is we looked, and what we found was for those kids who were low in self-esteem, but could hold a sense of kind of kindness for themselves, to recognize that they were not alone, that other young people were struggling. And also just, I guess, an awareness of their, I guess, negative kind of self-talk without pushing it away.
Mhm.
So those kids that were able to do that, it's almost like it was a buffer for their mental health. So over time, which was really, I mean, to see that in the data was really exciting, I guess. You don't always get that. And it was quite beautiful. And I guess, and it's not like, we need more science to follow it, but it showed, the importance of compassion at those times when we're struggling, when stuff is hard, when we fail, when we screw up, when we don't behave the way we want to, whether that's as a parent, whether that's, as a, as a worker, wearing whatever hat we're wearing,
Mhm.
and yeah, that research is really interesting. So I guess kind of bringing that then back into the practice, applying it to my own life, yeah, and watching what's happening out there in the research world. Yeah.
I think that that adds a credibility to the idea of compassion and self-compassion too, because as much as we can understand it and think it's this flowery word, and
Yeah.
it would be nice to have the
Yeah.
work that you're doing, as well as the other researchers who are exploring this topic, are really just like more and more revealing that it
Mm.
is almost like a protective factor that we can all start to encourage in our daily lives. So maybe
Yeah.
that's something that we can chat about now. Like, if someone's like, okay, well, I want to be more compassionate to myself, but I don't know where to start, how
Yeah.
would you go about it?
Very nice. And can I just speak to that point that you said? Because you're right. There is this idea that, it's kind of soft and flowery and kind of fluffy. Actually, I would say it kind of takes courage. It takes, takes self-reflection. It takes, I mean, you've got to reflect not only on what's happening in that moment potentially, but on, your broader history and kind of how you grew up and what you were taught. It's hard work, but also there is this piece in the research which is worth mentioning first, I think, and that is it's not a passive thing. So actually, if you're able to take compassion, you're then able to step in and take responsibility, if you like, step that. Yeah. And so, where would I start? Sorry, I'm going back to your question now, but where would I start? I would probably start by sitting with someone and saying, have a think about what happened in your house in terms of emotions. What were other people, like the giants that you grew up with, maybe your mum and dad or whoever that was? How did they interact with their emotions? So, what did you see maybe between the two of them, or whatever those relationships were in your house? How did people respond when emotions came up for you? Can you remember what happened there? Because I think, um, this idea of we're responsible for our emotions, right? We're response able, but maybe not responsible for the stuff that we perhaps weren't taught, or we didn't find out about, or we didn't see. So some people even struggle to name, emotions that are showing up, to recognize them, to know that they show up in their body. And so I would start there. And I would start there because I think that is a kind move that allows us to then step in and do something about that. Yeah.
And I imagine that there's certain areas in life that, in particular relationships as well, that can be a little bit more challenging to bring compassion to ourselves in that regard. And
Yeah.
something that we've spoken about before has been parenting. Like this idea that, as a parent, you're supposed to come equipped with all of the tools and facilities to, do it perfectly. But it can actually be obviously one of the most challenging things that you have to go through, and how can you maybe bring compassion into that sort of relationship?
Yeah. One thing I often think about and I have given some thought to since, becoming a parent, is how would I like my kids to respond to their emotions? So what would I like them to be able to do? And one part, for me, I guess, is that they can stand up and own their emotions. And that's a good thing. So, for example, to get to a place where, and I'll try and model that. I think that's, and I guess that's it's part of compassion, if you like, as the process anyway. Is firstly, it starts with kind of, turning inwards, noticing what's happening, calling out that you're in pain, that something's hurting. So I love it if I get a young person stand up and say, I'm feeling angry. I'm like, okay, I might not like the behavior that came before, but I love, and there's something you can bring positive reinforcement in. I love that you're able to name your emotions just then, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And so I think that comes from that place where we sort of do that firstly for ourselves, and then they can kind of see that in the moment. And then I guess a lot of the values work around how do you want to be as a parent? What are the qualities that you want to bring in the moments? Kindness, love, attention, whatever it might be. Openness. And then I would say hold those kind of lightly. And most importantly, what are you going to do when you don't live by those values? So when, you're inattentive, when you're distracted, when you don't want to be there, that's self-compassion, and right there, I think, is a moment where we have so much opportunity to teach, people, the next generation, that are going out in the world to find a way to show up to their own stuff and to not, because I don't think we can choose the emotions that show up, but we can certainly take responsibility for our own stuff, and we can kind of choose what we do after, the words that come out of our mouth, the actions that we take, and also, if we get that wrong, it's a matter, if we can bring some kindness to ourselves, maybe in the moments that follow, we can show up and say we're sorry to our kids. That's hard. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I guess before you were saying it's soft and flowery, I would say absolutely not. About as far as you can get from soft and flowery.
You know
Yeah.
what? And I think you're right. And sort of hearing what you're saying, even for those of us who aren't parents, the idea that you can still be sort of responsible for how you're modeling your own emotional experiences within your relationships in general. Like we can't really put feeling aside and go, oh, I'll do my feelings after I spend time with my husband or after I go out with my girlfriends. Like we're feeling in the midst of all of this, and if we are brave enough to hold our emotions and express them and
Yes.
not be ashamed of them with our
Yes.
friends and with our family, then
Yeah.
maybe they can also go, oh well, maybe it's okay for me to say, you know what, I'm really scared, or I'm really angry right now. And so it's almost like, we're all each other's parents in a kind of way.
I agree. Absolutely.
um Thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us today. I think that's so, this is a topic that we could explore for so long, and obviously one that at Indigo, in our therapeutic rooms, is something that we love to explore and also consider to be really essential for, living a sort of a happy and fulfilled and purposeful life, and having really happy and fulfilled and purposeful relationships with one another. So hopefully we'll get Sarah back on and we can dig into this a little bit deeper. But thank you so much for joining us.
Like, what? What do you mean? We barely got
I know, this is the thing. We need like a 1.5 hour session really just to scratch the surface.
Yeah. But seriously, thank you for having me. You do such a great job, and I love it's lovely to be part of it. Yeah.
It's so great to hear from all of these amazing minds and learn a little bit of something new every week. And for anyone who's watching, feel free to DM us if you've got any questions or topics that you'd love us to explore with the psychologists. And as I say every week, you're not alone in your journey and your challenges and your struggles. And we've got some incredible practitioners, just like Sarah, who are working with Indigo to sort of help you, guide you through those challenges and struggles at the moment. So make sure you get in touch with us if you need a little bit of extra support. Thanks again, Sarah.
Thanks, Ash.